What's happening, family? Welcome to Arrington's Most Interesting People. Look, on this episode, I was honored to have a great conversation with my dear friend, Dr. Claville. He's a political and legal analyst, as well as host of the award-winning The Claville Report. Now, as y'all might know, I'm a political buff. I love politics, news, you name it. Like to talk about it all the time. So I really had some good moments with Dr. Claville. We just talked about the early stages of elections, like early. Just imagine if we could predict current situation right now with the election and all that other stuff, man. We couldn't point it out. So again, I hope y'all enjoyed this great conversation I had with my good friend, Dr. Claville, political and legal analyst, Arrington's Most Interesting People. All right, what's going on, my friends? Look, it's yours truly, Arrington Gavin, here for another great segment I call Arrington's Most Interesting People, where I get to sit one-on-one with some amazing individuals, not only doing great things in their line of work, but also in the community. Now, on today's Arrington's Most Interesting People, I get to sit down with the one, Dr. Claville. Now, before I bring him out, let me just tell you a little bit more about this awesome brother. Now, he is the host of not one, but two amazing shows on weekly shows, State of the Water, as well as the Claville Report on WNSP Hot 91, the Soul of VA, Hot 91.1 FM, as well as a legal analyst and political analyst. And he's also an executive advisor for the president of the Norfolk State University. Behold the green and gold. That's right, I had to say that. But he's also a good friend. I'm so excited to have him on, ladies and gents, the one and only, Dr. Claville. How you doing, sir?
Good to see you, Eric.
Always sharp, always sharp. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much taking the time out your busy schedule to come, talk with your friends. So I truly appreciate it.
Well, look, thank you so much for having me. Listen, as I told you before, from the very beginning, I've been one of your biggest fans, if not your biggest fan. I think you're extremely talented, what you're doing in the community, with your passion. I tell everyone, follow your passion, and you'll never work a day in your life, and success will always follow. And you're a perfect example of that. So,
man, I truly appreciate it. I'm a huge fan. Likewise, like I said, hey, look, one thing we have in common, we love politics.
Absolutely.
Our first question I want to open up will be, where did it start? What got you involved in law, policy, and politics?
Well, that's interesting because, that question, I have to think all the way back to when I was a kid. So, as a third grader, 8 years old, I remember career day. I remember career day. And career day, the question was, what do you want to be? So I said I wanted to be a lawyer. And I'll never forget, my uncle, one of my father's brothers was a lawyer, retired judge. His law partner, of course, was a lawyer, retired judge. And my best friend, Dad, was a lawyer at the time and a judge. Currently, he's a federal judge, chief judge of the Fifth Circuit Federal Court. And they, of course, lawyers all through the family. And of course, we had preachers in the family and so forth. So I said I want to be a lawyer. So I remember I spelled it Lawer.
That's it. And that's a head scratcher right there. They said, bless your soul, bless this child's soul.
So look, I spelled it Lawer. So I'm in line at lunch, right? And I never forget a friend of mine, Clemens Henderson. He said, "You spelled it lawyer, Lawer. It's supposed to be a Y in there." So I'll never forget the little things you remember.
That's right.
As kids. So at that point, I was very intentional, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I started preparing myself at the age of 11 and actually 10 when I wanted to choose which school I went to. Wow, so we went to
11 years old.
11 years old. So we had what's called magnet schools at that time, and my brother and I, we call ourselves the first generation of full-blown integration. So we had these specialized schools where you would get the best talent in the city to go to. And with that, you had the test to get into the schools. Long story short, ended up going to the school primarily because they had a debate team.
Okay.
So at 11 years old, sixth grade, I signed up for debate. And then, of course, I think we started taking it in seventh grade.
Okay.
So with that, I started studying, I never forget, it was criminal justice reform and euthanasia, right? So at 12 years old, I'm studying criminal justice reform. Things we're talking about today.
I'm just amazed right now at the age group because I'm pretty sure I don't even read this now, and I'm almost 30.
So we started, reading about that, and then of course in 8th grade is when you start to compete at 13 years old. So I started to compete at 13 in two-man debate, LD, Lincoln Douglas, and what's called extemporaneous speaking, where at that time period you had to. Now, there was no internet at the time, all right? So we're talking 1987, 88, right? No internet. So the news you had was what these magazines call Newsweek, right? and Time, right? Time magazine. So you had these magazines there. And so basically you get this topic for extemporaneous speaking, and you had 30 minutes to prepare a speech. So that's why I learned how to prepare speeches and do research.
Okay.
And we would be able to write our notes on what's called computer cards. So these were cards that you would feed into massive computers, and they were programs. They had these holes in them. So we would get those computer cards because they were just throwaways at the time. And for a two-man debate, we would have a topic during the year. You would actually research that topic and then go debate across the country or region or state, which what we did the region and the state.
Okay.
So being from Louisiana, we travel all through Louisiana and also to Texas. So I chose my high school from there based on the debate team, competed, and so then after that, it was like, hey, I want to be a lawyer.
And right now you have an amazing resume. I mean, you're one of, I would say, Hampton Roads' top, when it comes to local elections and that, federal elections, hey, talk to Eric Claville. I mean, that's where I always say, look, I got him on speed dial. Let me ask this question on this. So I think it's very interesting, you doing it at such a young age, because I think now it's different in our era. Like, I mean, we have a lot of kids that do have pursuits that are, they are accomplishing them, but especially when it comes to, I think the way you did yours, it's very different. And I mean, to say, okay, at 11, I want to be a lawyer. I might have spelled it different. Right. I might have spelled it wrong, but I'm now doing what I wanted to work towards, and I did the step-by-step process. Because one thing I want listeners to always catch from this is, okay, what are the step-by-step process I need to do to pursue my dreams? And I think that was a perfect example that you hit, how you said, okay, look, I looked at the different schools, the debate team, let me get my feet wet in all avenues of it. Now let's talk about, because I love politics. Let's get on the things.
I want to give a quick note here, and it's about chasing your dreams, being purpose-driven. You're going to have obstacles, right? So, but the key is, how do you overcome those obstacles?
Absolutely.
Right? So for me, I want to be a lawyer, and of course it led into college and politics and policy. We'll talk about it in a moment. But one thing I had an issue. You have to talk as a lawyer, right? You have to speak. But I had what's called a disfluency. And that is the proper term for stuttering. So I stuttered. I stuttered terribly.
Wow.
Right. So I did speech classes in elementary school, of course, in middle school. And with a very healthy self-esteem, I just went at it, stumbling over words and things of that nature. But I never forget, I was sitting on my bed, and like I said, I grew up in a very religious home, God-fearing home, and I said, Lord, take this away. I want to, take this stuttering away. And I never forget, I was probably 12 years old at the time, and 14. I remember going to high school, and I was throughout the day, and I came home, and I heard a voice say, what did you not do today? Wow. And I didn't stutter.
Wow.
So at 14, I haven't stuttered since.
And see, that's awesome, because I don't have a stutter, but I have a fear of public speaking. I hate public speaking. I hate public speaking.
Well, listen. The Coast Live, obviously.
Hey, look. Let me tell you something. If I can go back to my very first, I do not want to remember it. And even like first radio interview, like I've always had that fear of, and like you said, self-esteem. If I always struggle, public speaking. I've always enjoyed, like we're doing now, having conversations with individuals, one-on-one. But the more I do so, and especially as a business owner, as the face of a brand, I'm like, well, look, Lord, hey, I got to overcome this fear, because if I want to see my business, my brand grow, I have to overcome this fear and I always say, never let the devil take over. You always got to say, okay, I got this. Let's take a deep breath. Let's not think of what other people think of you. Just, hey, do you, as well as, it's like riding a bike, because it's, you're familiar with this. So you got to keep that. So look, I want to bring up the importance of when it comes to politics and informing, making sure our youth is informed and having a knowledge of how important is it for youth? And I mean, let's talk about the age, not even to the legal age. I mean, excuse me, to the legal voting age. Right. But should they even come to an understanding before that happens?
The answer is yes. And the question becomes, what grabs their attention and how do you communicate it to them? I mean, we were once their age as well. There are a lot of things that are coming at you, but there was something that always grabs your attention. What's that one thing? Was it Public Enemy for some people? Was it the Educator, KRS-One? What was it that grabbed your attention? And for this generation, there's so much information coming at you. I mean, and they get it in snippets. It's the social media, the TikToks,
15-second snippets.
Right, absolutely. So if you can't catch it in 15 seconds, then it's hard. But the issues are still there because here's what's happening. Even you have a segment of the population that is decreasing, but they want to see pre-1960 policies come back. We see it with the constitutional elimination of the pre-clearance part of the Voting Rights Act. We also see it with the constitutional elimination of affirmative action.
Yes,
right?
Yes.
Which, again, I believe should have been called corrective action because you're correcting the wrongs of the past by using the same mechanism in which you created the wrongs, right? So we see it with the fight for voting rights and access to the ballot box, where we see some states eliminating access, decreasing, and some states like the Commonwealth of Virginia, increasing access to the ballot box. So these issues are very important because the vote still matters. Wow. It is the most powerful nonviolent weapon that we have. It's so important that across other parts of the world, we actually have mechanisms and people that go, former President Jimmy Carter, will go monitor elections to make sure that they're fair.
Wow.
Fair and equitable. So that is how important voting is. That's how important being informed is about the issue. That's how important it is to be engaged all the time.
Now let me, if I put let me play a little devil's advocate. When it comes to someone saying your vote matters, it's very important to vote. Absolutely. A lot of voters and even people that are new to voting, they see a lot of promises not being made. Right. And so to them, they're like, okay, why even waste my time? Why waste my gas? And then on top of that too, it's a pattern that we're always going to continue to see, whether if it's hey, a one-term Democratic president or, 2-term Democratic president, and, regardless of the party, we see a pattern that happens. So for that individual to say, I don't think it really matters. Yeah. I mean, what would you say to that individual?
Well, I would say that, yes, every campaign promise does not get met. There are difficulties. Of course, you promise the stars and usually land around between the moon and Earth, right? But that is an issue, right? And I do understand that perception. But the other question, and that's where you hold individuals accountable. But the question now becomes, if you don't do that, if you don't vote, if you don't become engaged, what is the alternative? And we got the alternative in 2016, right?
Yes, we did. Right? I'm still recovering on
it. And again, I mean, vote for whoever you want to, but that was the most chaotic for 4 or 5 years, where I believe it did more damage to our democracy than anything.
I feel like it was a huge reason of the division in our area. Absolutely. Because, again, and I mentioned to you before the show, for me, I never went with the herd. So I'm always gonna, not regardless of party, I'm always gonna say, okay, if this person's policy, I'll give them a chance, or I'll follow along. So I'm always, back and forth. But the first thing I look, regardless of any candidate, character. And if you have an awful character, I can't do it. And there's so many people I feel as though money over morals, and that's never the case, because the thing is, money doesn't go with you to the grave. Money's not here forever, so you have to always rely on morals and loyalty and respect. That we do not get that. I mean, we see not to get too much more into the last president, but I mean, how many indictments have we seen past presidents get, in a sense, and there's so many people getting locked up, this and that and the other. But no, that was a big question I wanted to ask, though, as far as when how important it is for young people to get involved, because I'm 28 years old. I think I was probably when I was 18, 19, I think I really started focusing a little more. I've always watched the news. I mean, as a kid, I mean, whatever parents had on, I check it out and this and that. But I'm more engaged now, where I'm watching multiple sides just on a regular. And because I love having, friends with difference of opinion, putting them all in one group. So because we always have to agree to disagree, but we learn also new things from individuals based on difference of opinion.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I've always, been that person, but I was probably 19 when I really, got involved in now seeing the understanding of, even local and state. And what's more important in your opinion, Dr. Claville, pay more attention on the federal level or your local state, politics?
Well, they're both very important.
Okay.
However, if I had to choose one, I would say local.
Okay.
The former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, who's passed, he said all politics is local. And that is very true. Because even your federal officials are voted on and sent from the local level. That's right. One of our, and again, I'll say his name. I think he's the smartest, one of the best congressmen we ever had. That's just Bobby Scott. He's at everything local. He's he's like the local congressman, but also on the federal level, he's very engaged. And that's a perfect example of how to be engaged both on the local, state, and federal level. But yeah, pay attention to the local because, listen, you go to the store every day, you go to schools every day, you go to church every day, you ride your roads every day. Businesses come into your community every day. They rise, businesses fail every day. So that is where you're living, right? However, federal laws, of course, trump local and state laws. And they come around, of course, once a year when you have the congressional session. So they're important as well. But your local election, make sure you pay attention to those. Okay. School board, city council, commissioner, board of elections, the planning committees. Those are very important. We have what's called local TV, right? Yes.
You probably never heard of that. They're like, what?
Exactly.
Chesapeake TV? I've never watched it.
But they stream them all. So if you want to go to it,
see your what do you call it? Your council meetings are always aired up
Absolutely.
there. I tune into it.
Absolutely.
And it's informative because as a business owner too, it is very important to know what's going on in your area. Now, how important is it because do you think on the education side, do you think, schools ranging from, I'll just say high school on the collegiate level, are they lacking more involvement with politics with their students? Because I think the big thing now is more young voters. A lot of politicians focus on we need our young people to vote. We need our young people. So and it's difficult because like I said, I'm 28. I have friends my age, maybe older or younger, that are
well, to be honest with you, I think personally, once you graduate high school, I think you should be automatically registered to vote with your driver's license. I think, period. Let's just make it happen, right? But when you say politics, there's politics and there's policy.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So politics is the theater of public policy. Public policy is the key, right? Public policy tells you how you live your life, how your life is dictated, how your business is dictated, the amount of taxes that you pay or don't pay, right?
That's true.
So public policy is really what I believe every student should be engaged in. So I think civics should be a course that's taken every single year in high school, because it teaches us about our country, our democracy. Listen, this is our country. Yeah. As African Americans, we built this country, and it's a great country, and it's a country that's worth preserving and keeping, our democracy itself. And I believe that we have to work from the ground up from our children to teach them about the greatness of this democracy. People are getting on boats, drowning in oceans to come here. I read a story the other day of individuals that got on from one country in Africa that were stowaways on a rudder of a massive ship. The rudder. As a
matter of fact, I know exactly what it was. I think 2 or 4 individuals.
Right. A rudder, right?
Throughout a whole trip on it.
An ocean, right? So you understand the ocean's going like this. I mean, it's not settled. So they endured a month, and I call it a tour, but months of treachery to reach. They thought they were coming to Europe or America. They ended up going to South America, to one of the countries there. But still, they're leaving their country. Death. It's.
Oh yeah, we've seen. I mean, remember the helicopter that was taken off? I think out of. I mean, that to me was enough to explain. I mean,
so if people are willing to risk their lives, leave everything that they know to come to this land for an opportunity, not a guarantee, but an opportunity. How much more should we be willing to protect?
Dr. Eric Claville, look, the past parts of this conversation has been amazing, but look, we're on our final one, and I want to discuss, okay, what are some local elections that the locals really keep eyes on, really focus more on?
Yeah. Well, when you talk about local elections, of course, you have your city council elections.
Yes.
In every city. Make sure you pay attention to those elections because those are the people that are making your local laws. City council and also, of course, the mayor, for your various cities. And, of course, Hampton Roads, our 7 cities plus 1 or 2. It all depends on how you
we inherit some Carolina cities for some reason.
Absolutely. So, but pay attention to those. As it relates to state elections, now keep this in mind. Right now, Hampton Roads has the opportunity in this election cycle of 2023, where all 140 seats of the General Assembly is up for election for re-election. We have the opportunity now to possibly have the executive house, the governor, the lieutenant governor, attorney general, all from Hampton Roads.
Wow.
That's true. And that being Virginia Beach. We also have the opportunity to have the president pro tem from, Portsmouth, right? Here from Hampton Roads. And also possibly the first African-American male Speaker of the House.
Wow.
Also from Portsmouth. Here at
Hampton Roads.
Hampton Roads has the opportunity to have the most powerful people in position.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Right? Out of all offices, major offices in the Senate, the House, leading the Senate, leading the House, and also...
and this is something unheard of in a state.
It's unheard of. So those are very important. And of course, you do have some competitive races, but most of them settled out in the general, in the primary election. So the general election itself, you're not going to have a lot of competition. You're going to, on the GOP side, you're going to have some that are kind of close. But the way that the lines have been redrawn, it does favor and lean toward a Democratic majority.
And I was just gonna ask that, like, was the district change, would that be an impact on these general elections?
Absolutely. So of course we have a new way of drawing our district lines. I was a proponent of not having.
I was going to ask, why did this happen?
Well, it was a good idea in theory, but after it kind of got fleshed out, the supporters were like, I don't think so. But it was too late because we educated the public and say this is a good idea. So they voted for it overwhelmingly, a constitutional amendment. So we have a commission that does it now, that's chosen by, of course, the legislators. And of course, you have legislators on there. The only issue that I have with it, there's no backstop. Right. If there's an issue, it goes to 2 experts that are chosen to draw, which happened this time, and then from there the court takes over, and then that's it. So there's no back and forth. Again, with new systems, you have kinks to work out. But I was a proponent of the last system.
Yeah, because I always get confused because, like I mentioned before, like I live in the city of Chesapeake. When we had the early voting, you had to go to your local registrar's office. Now, Chesapeake is not a small city. I mean, I'm on the Greenbrier side, and our registrar's office is, off of Battlefield Cedar Road. It's far away from people that are more in the Chesapeake Square side. So it's like, okay, it's not making it easy. But my thing is, and this is just my, my theory, there's a huge political base on the Greenbrier side, further out the, Hickory, you keep going. And so a lot of people were saying that the whole district change was really something in favor for the, the GOP side of it. I mean, am I wrong in a sense, or?
Well, actually, it was probably split.
Okay.
For the most part. But, ultimately, the way that the districts are, like I said, it does favor Democratic leaning. But that was out of the control
I got you.
legislators.
Okay.
So if it was something of that nature, it backfired.
Okay, true.
Right. True. So, but basically, know where you're voting because your district that you're voting in is different from what it was in 2020. Know who your representatives are because they're different from 2020 or 2019 rather. And know what the voting days are. So you can still register to vote, get registered. You could start voting early after Labor Day. Make sure you pay attention to those dates, 45 days before the general election. General election, November 7th of this year. Make sure you go out and vote. Look,
another question. We talked on the local level. Let's talk on the federal level. Now, we have a huge, a lot of candidates right now running on the Republican ticket for presidency. We have, I believe, a total of 3, including our current president, Joe Biden, on the Democratic ticket. And we also have a third party candidate in Dr. Cornel West. I'm a huge fan of Cornel West, just very, very big fan of him. But I want to ask, who is right now worse for the country? Because in a sense, is it the Democrats, is it the Republicans? I mean, we have a third party candidate that's really being very vocal to an extent. So, like, who in your mind?
Well, the question is not really who's worse for the country, but what policies are worse, right? Okay. Now, of course, we currently have a former president who has been indicted 4 times. There's going to be a trial before the election. There's going to be a verdict that comes out that's probably not going to be favorable in one of those trials, right? At least one, if not all. So, and then, of course, he's very divisive. That's, of course, his own party knows that. So it just is what it is. I think at this point, we don't need anyone that's spewing hatred, that type of rhetoric. We just can't afford it. We need someone in office that's going to bring the country together, that's going to bolster our country itself economically, militarily, but also the confidence and the belief. Belief is everything. If you look at the most terrible times, or challenging times, let's say challenging times of our world, whether it be World War I, World War II, whether it be the 1960s, whatever it may be, whether it be the time where the Soviet Union was falling down, whether it be 9/11, we had leaders that basically galvanized the whole country and said, it's our time.
Absolutely.
It's our time to come together. We need that type of leader right now. Do
you see that in any candidates at the moment right now, in your opinion?
I think that Dr. Cornel West is getting issues out there. Of course, I don't think he really thinks he's going to be president, but he's getting issues out there. I don't think the former president can do that. I've said that before. The current president, I believe that he understands it, but I just can he do it? Is he the one to galvanize the country? I believe he can. If there's a crisis, I think he can do that. But I also think that overall, if you look at the candidates who are running, by the way, I think the other GOP nominees are just, not nominees, but other GOP candidates are I don't see them.
I see some that do want to not see a previous president in office, and I see some of them, in my opinion, that are holding cabinet positions under this president. They see the poll numbers, obviously. Absolutely. So
like Tim Scott. people are saying Tim Scott's running for vice president.
Larry Elder. I'm just saying, I don't even know if he's making the debate stage, but with that being said, I do have one. My final question I want to bring up is term limits. So term limits for all positions, because also in the discussion when it comes to office officials, elections going on, how old is this person? And it's been the joke of the town ever since Biden's been in office. I'm not gonna lie, it hasn't helped his case by tripping not once but twice up Air Force One, and then the camera keeps and that doesn't help his situation, which everybody can trip. I'm not making that a huge thing, but with him being 80 years old, Trump is 77, Dianne Feinstein, a senator out of California, I believe, she's 90. Mitch McConnell, the numbers, age,
also
James Clyburn.
Also, she's suffering from, decline. But as you said, Mitch McConnell, of course, he had the episode where he froze.
Which was very scary.
It was. And again, it's one of those questions that come up all the time because people do get older. In some cases, you have institutional knowledge you want to keep. I don't think we don't need term limits to be etched in stone, but I think that parties and legislators should look at themselves and say it's time, right? And of course, voters. Yeah, they're elected every 2 years, our congresspersons. So voters can create term limits by sitting someone out. Same thing with U.S. senators. We can do that. So, and presidents every 4 years. So I don't think that we need it because I think the actual election cycle creates the mechanism for term limits. As it relates to the court as well, I don't think we need it either. Because again, I think the Republican Party has been very efficient in managing term limits for people that they want to cycle in or cycle out, which is why they have a majority for the foreseeable future. But I think the Democrats have not been very good in mastering that because when they've had the opportunity for an older justice to step down voluntarily to replace them with a younger Democratic justice or liberal justice.
It was a struggle.
Right, they didn't do it.
Yeah.
And they waited too long. From Justice Marshall, we got Clarence Thomas. From Justice Ginsburg, of course, we got a couple of the justices we have now. So it's just one of those situations.
Okay. Well, look, Dr. Claville, man, I truly appreciate it. I can talk for hours with you, man. But we don't have that kind of time on the show. But look, I truly appreciate you taking the time out your busy schedule to talk with me here.
Absolutely.
On Arrington's most interesting, because I do consider you one of the most interesting individuals, that I know. So I truly appreciate it. And again, how can people continue to stay engaged and follow you with your future things?
Absolutely. Well, tune in every Sunday at 10 a.m. and also at 12:30 on WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA. That's 91.1 on your dial, or go to our TuneIn app. And you can follow us also at the Claville Report. That's at the Claville Report. And you can see all of our past episodes, engage us on social media, and also our YouTube channel.
Awesome. Well, once again, people, I hope you enjoyed a great conversation I could call Arrington's most interesting people. Be tuning into the next one where I get to sit down with an individual not only doing great things in their line of work, but also in their community. Calling out.